I'm here talking with Roy Kramer, former SEC commissioner, who was fundamental in getting the SEC championship game started. Mr. Kramer, how are you this morning?
Doing great.
I'd like to talk to you for a minute, if you have time, about the formation of the SEC championship and how it all came about.
Well, when we explored expansion, which is a rather hot topic these days, as you well know, but this was way back in 1990 when we started to look at it, and as we began to realize we would probably end up with 12 teams once Arkansas and South Carolina committed, we became aware, and were aware, that if you had a conference that had 12 or more teams and you couldn't play a round-robin schedule and so forth in the conference, under the NCAA rule, you could have a playoff game. Now, it was put in primarily for Division III because you had some very large Division III comp, but it applied across the board. The difference was there were no 12-team conferences in those days. And so as soon as we expanded, we began to look at how to put together a football schedule. Obviously, in the Southeastern Conference, you take a lot of time to look at football scheduling. And we began to realize that probably the most equitable way to do it would be to put the teams into two divisions and then have a championship game at the end of the season. And so we decided to move forward with it. It was a little controversial at the start. The other conferences were somewhat upset about it. In fact, they threatened that they were going to propose some legislation. As it turned out, our game turned out as this game we're here to sort of film and talk about today was so successful that obviously they began to think about perhaps rather than pass legislation, they might want to look at that. And, of course, as it turned out, you have an ACC. And you used to have a Big 12 one, and now you're going to have a Big 10 and a Pac-10 one, of course. So we decided to put it together. The biggest concern I had in the beginning was whether our fans and the media and so forth would adapt to the divisional concept, because we'd always played just for the Southeastern Conference Championship and as you played through the season. But it was amazing in that very first year how the fans and the media picked up on who's going to win the East and who's going to win the West and so forth. I always felt the championship game would succeed with the great passion for college football in this part of the country, that kind of an idea would work. And as it turned out, of course, it's been enormously successful, and there's probably sort of a trademark, so to speak, for the conference now.
It was absolutely fantastic, and in fact, I was a high school senior when that game happened, and I was announced at graduation to attend the University of Southern Mississippi. And when Alabama went on to this exciting SEC Conference Championship and the national championship, I thought, hey, wait a minute, there's something about Alabama. Of course, being an Alabama guy, so you actually had a little bit of role with me attending Alabama with this conference idea. It was fantastic. What are you up to these days?
Well, let me say one other thing about the game, and then I'll tell you. One of the controversies, particularly that first year, and this was true of some of our coaches, and it was really true of the media, people were concerned that once we had a championship game, no team would ever win another national championship because they would knock each other off and so forth. And so there were a lot of people said that we were really shooting ourselves in the foot by doing that. And the interesting part is Alabama won this game and then went on to win the national championship in the first year, which sort of shot that in the head.
Well, and now, I mean, to continue with that thought, it's become a semifinal with all the wonderful matchups between Florida and Alabama, and it is the game, seems like, just about every year to decide who plays in that championship game, whether it's been Alabama, Florida, LSU. It's been fantastic.
Well, it really has, and it's sort of helped the conference in the side that it puts a spotlight on the conference in a way that team that wins that game has a great shot at least playing in that championship game, and of course, as we know, winning it in the last several years.
How do you feel about the what appears imminent of the next level of expansion to 14 or 16 teams?
Well, I said from the beginning, after we expanded it, I did not think we had seen the end of conference realignment, and I think that's beginning to play out. I think we're going to see that. We may end up, instead of the so-called 6 conferences, we may see ourselves end up with 4 or 5 major conferences. It's a difficult time, but I think it will be I think in the long run it'll be probably positive for college football. I think it'll add excitement to it, and everybody saying, "Oh, this is you wrecking tradition." Well, we wrecked tradition when we went from 10 to 12 and put in a championship game, and I think this will just create more excitement and more interest from the fans.
Well, and it seems to me it'll take a little bit less out of the argument for a playoff system. There'll still always be that argument, but when you have, several 16-team divisions competing, there'll be, I think, a little bit less controversy as to who's in that final game because you've had more of a powerhouse versus powerhouse.
I think that's probably true. And of course, I was greatly involved in the formation of the BCS. We may have a playoff someday. I don't know whether we will or not, but I think the regular season of college football is so great. The traditions of the Florida Georgia game, or the Tennessee Alabama game, or the Auburn Alabama game, or the LSU Arkansas game is so great that we want to make sure, however we finish the season, whatever we do for the champ, that we don't ruin the regular season of college football, because that's the backbone of what has made it so great through the years.
Absolutely. Again, we're talking with former SEC commissioner and all-around legend, Roy Kramer. Well, Mr. Kramer, what are you up to these days?
Well, as little as possible. Do a little fishing, try to still play a little golf, and enjoy watching a lot of football on the weekends. Somebody said, well, do you miss the day-to-day? Well, you don't miss the problems, but you miss the people, because there are great people around college athletics, and you miss the people. But thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing, and just taking it easy and then watching everything unfold as we go down the path.
How many games do you make it to per season these days?
Well, I usually go to 2 or 3 live games a year. And you get spoiled by television these days, because you can sit there and watch 3 or 4 of them at a time. But I try still to go to a few, and I go to a lot of high school games. I still enjoy very much going to a high school game.
Fantastic. Again, that was Mr. Roy Kramer, former SEC commissioner. We appreciate him being on with us, and look forward to the project that ESPN and the NASCAR media team is putting on about the 1992 championship.